Welcome to this Sunday morning talk. When I mentioned it was a Sunday morning talk, I recalled that many years ago, with all the retreats I've been giving over the world, on one occasion the retreat was held in a Catholic retreat centre in North Perth. And as soon as I started the Sunday morning talk, after about 5 minutes, the local priest from next door ran into the hall. Please turn off the microphone right now. I said, why? What's gone wrong? He said, because is it on? No, it's not on. So please turn on the microphone. Okay? No, not yet. Have we got recordings? Uh-oh. Okay. Any signal? No. They can't even hear me. Any signal? Is it working? Okay. It's distorted. Yeah. I haven't got a clue. I just give the talk. Reckon. This never happened to the Buddha when he gave his talks. It's still distorting? Come on, tech gurus. Carry on. Thank you. Okay. If it gets really too bad, never mind. Life is suffering. Anyway, I was going to say on that particular talk, this priest came in, a Catholic priest, said, stop talking, because the microphone I was using was like a Wi-Fi, and it just happened by chance to be this. It's better. Yeah. Okay. Had to be the same frequency as his Sunday morning sermon. So the talk on meditation was broadcast live over his church on a Sunday morning. He wasn't very pleased with that. But anyway, I thought it was good. A good way of spreading Dharma to places that you've never heard it before. Anyway, back to the talk. So, it's okay, yeah, okay. Just watching it. Yeah, how'd you do that? Okay. Is it still on? No. Okay. I know one way to cure it. You can all go now. Hello? Anybody there? Is that any better? No. Oh, okay. Okay. That's one of those. Oh, no, I won't say that this time. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. Sorry? Okay. The priest, yes, that's right. So he had a chance to be converted, but it never worked. I had to turn it off. But anyway, let's go back to yeah. What I was going to talk about this morning is now the breath meditation. You okay? Can you hear reasonably well? Now, what I'm going to talk about is the breath meditation. The breath meditation. So when you're doing the breath meditation, get feedback. Now, one of the first things that you are supposed to do, this is how the Buddha taught it, is find a secluded place. Is this secluded here? How many people in this room? Sometimes it's hard to find seclusion, but what you can do is when you close your eyes and sit still, almost imagine a little bubble around you. I've done this many times when I've been traveling or going to a place and you're sitting down somewhere and there's lots of noise around you. Imagine a bubble around you, and it is like your own little cave. And when you're in a cave, you can't hear anything outside. It's almost as if you are just putting a wall around you, an invisible wall, an imaginary wall, so sounds cannot sort of get inside of you. Can't get into your space. And after a while, you just imagine that for a few minutes, and then that actually starts to work. It's as if you are training your brain not to pick up noises from outside. It's not that difficult to do. Any of you who have husbands who love to watch cricket or love to watch football, or your wives like to watch movies, you can see them doing that all the time. They're watching the football. Darling, it's time for dinner. They can't hear you. They're not ignoring you. The end of a movie, come on, darling, somebody's just called, you have to come. They just can't hear you because you are in a little bubble, your own little bubble. And of course it helps that if you're in that little bubble, you're enjoying what is happening. Sometimes the ability to focus very much depends upon the joy and the happiness which you're experiencing with that movie or football match or that talk. Sometimes that people can listen to talks even and get so involved in it they can't hear anything outside. It's wonderful when you can actually do that. It's very rare that you manage to do that, but every now and again, okay, it's got nothing to do with meditation, but here we go. It's going to soon be, what's it called, the Halloween day. So I always have these wonderful stories about Halloweens. It's okay now? Okay. 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 Can I still tell the Halloween joke? Because I remember this gentleman, he was the head of wisdom publications in the United States. And he brought his kid, little daughter, about 8, 9, 10 years of age, to the temple. You could see she hated going to the temple. She only went there because her dad told her to. But nevertheless, her dad brought her, introduced her to me. And so I realized if I talked about the Four Noble Truths or dependent origination or even Anapanasati, she would fall fast asleep or she'd run away. So instead I told her about some of these stories and just how what insight is being able to see a different solution to some of the ordinary problems of life. But this was an extraordinary problem. The story began when this man, he went to the temple one evening for a nice talk, and on the way back, he had a choice, go the long way around back to his home or take the shortcut. I never liked shortcuts, they're always very dangerous, especially when the shortcut is through the cemetery. But he decided to take the shortcut. He wasn't afraid of ghosts. How many people here are afraid of ghosts? You are, okay. Be careful. So he took the shortcut. But, halfway through the cemetery grounds, there was not a problem at all. But just over halfway through, you notice in the cemeteries, the lighting always gets darker when you get to the middle of the cemetery. It's much more darker than on the main streets. And anyway, he got through the middle of the cemetery, no problem at all. Just past the middle of the cemetery, he could swear he was hearing a noise behind him. Something was following him. And he thought, it's just my imagination. I shouldn't be so worried. It's quite okay. But then he really started listening to what was following him. And it sounded like something was bump, 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 bumping behind him. And whenever that happens to you, please never do this. He made a really big mistake. He looked behind him. And he couldn't believe what he saw. There was a vertical coffin. Just now at the bottom, and it went wide and then went to an apex at the top. And it had all sort of dirt on it, like it just came out of the ground. And cobwebs. And it was bump, 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 following after him. Now, first of all, how many of you have heard this story before? A lot of you. Anyway, it's coming. I'm not going to stop now. And so he started walking really fast. But it didn't matter how fast he walked, bump, 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 it was following him, and even worse, it was catching up on him. So he started running. And when he got to the edge of the cemetery, through the cemetery gates onto the road, he thought, I'm safe now. The coffins belong in cemeteries. They can't get out of the cemetery. But the coffin never knew that law. Bump, bump, bump. As the coffin started chasing him down the street. And he was running as fast as he could. Bump, 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 bump. And the coffin was running after him. And he got to, his house was very close. He got to his garden gate. He never opened the garden gate. He jumped over it. And when he got to his front door, he turned around, and there was the coffin at the garden gate. The coffin couldn't jump over the gate. He thought he was safe. No. Bump! 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 And the coffin crashed through the garden gate. So he was nothing between him and the coffin except a few minutes, or half a minute. He reached for his house keys. You know what happens when you're not mindful? He dropped his keys. And the coffin was bumping closer to him. He picked up the first key he could find, put it in the lock. Oh, so lucky. It was the correct key. He opened the door, jumped inside, slammed the door shut. He was safe inside his house. And you could see, the glass panels you have on the front door of houses? You could see the coffin just on the other side, only a couple of inches from him. But he had the door between him. He was safe. Bump! As the coffin started crashing into the front door. Would his front door hold? Bump! The wood started to splinter, and the hinges started to give way. He realized he was in trouble. So he ran up the stairs of his house, up the top to the top story. Bump! And the coffin broke through the front door of his house. He was in trouble. But he was on the top of the stairs, and he saw the coffin look left, look right, and he thought he was safe. And the coffin looked up. And the coffin started bumping up the stairs. Bump, 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 bump. I tell this story because at this time, that young girl, she was paying 100% full attention to what I was saying. He said that was the first time she ever paid attention when a monk gave a talk. But anyway, what could he do now? There's only one other place that had a lock, and that was the bathroom. So he jumped inside the bathroom, locked the door, but there's a pretty small chance that the coffin would not be able to break down that front door of the bathroom. And indeed, the coffin saw him go in there. So bump, bump, crash! And the coffin broke through the bathroom door. There was no more place to run. It just the coffin and him, he couldn't go anywhere. So what could he do? His heart was pounding. He thought this was the end of him. He's going to be attacked by this supernatural coffin straight from the cemetery which had followed him home. But instinctively, he reached out to something to defend himself. There was a bottle of medicine which was on the shelf, and he threw it at that coffin. And it was a bottle. The bottle broke, and all of this brown, smelly liquid went over the coffin. And the coffin stopped. Never moved again. You got it. It was cough mix. It stops the coffin. That's a stupid joke, but if you hadn't heard it before, it's fun to tell. Anyway, back to meditation. So anyway, there's actually a purpose to telling funny stories, because when you tell a funny story, you find your energy levels goes up. You're actually more aware. You've got more oomph in your body. That's one of the reasons why telling funny stories, or being inspired, or seeing joy in life, even actually seeing simple things, like there's a couple of birds this morning when I came up after the morning meditation, back to the top story. A couple of magpies there were playing around over a piece of bread. And sometimes they're very funny. They bring joy to your heart. When it brings joy to your heart, it brings energy. So one of the first things Buddha said, once you've found a nice quiet place to meditate, and if you can't find a quiet place, to just put a little bubble around yourself. Once you've found that quiet place, the next thing is to, they say, establish mindfulness. Sometimes it says in front of you. And that was always concerning to me. This is Anapanasati, as the Buddha taught it. Mindfulness in front of you. Where am I? I've got to find out where I am first of all, and then I can put mindfulness in front of me. Where do you live? When you identify with yourself, if I ask you to point to yourself, where do you point to? And it's never here. This is not where I live. So it confused me what that word really means. Was it a good translation? It wasn't a good translation. The word is parimukha. It means to put it first, give it priority, put it in front. And once you get that, one of those idioms which we use in all languages, it doesn't mean just put it in front of wherever you think you exist, but like put it as number one priority. Establish mindfulness first of all, before you even start to look at your breath. And this is an important point because having taught meditation for so many years, that you know that sometimes people find it difficult to watch their breath. And they find it difficult, and after a while they just give up. They can't do it. It doesn't work for them. And the reason is because they go to the breath too fast. They haven't established mindfulness yet. Or they may be just they're depressed, they're anxious, fed up. They go and watch your breath. Watch my breath. They can't do that because there's not enough mindfulness yet to be able to watch the breath. So the first thing is to establish that mindfulness. And there's some simple rules of how to establish mindfulness. And of course, one of those simple rules is that you want to be in a happy space, first of all. To be comfortable, physically comfortable. The Buddha always said about the middle way, avoiding extremes of physical positions which are going to tire you or cause you pain. It's one of the reasons why I emphasize the point that the Buddha taught Anapanasati. He never taught Anapanasati. The two are close together, but they're very different. So don't be aware of pain in your body. See if you can find a nice, comfortable position for you to meditate in. And of course, when we first designed this place, we tried to make it as comfortable as possible. But this is about 13 years ago when we built this. And times have changed. And I mentioned this to some people in Singapore at the last retreat. Come on, it's about time that some of you design some much better meditation cushions or meditation seats. High-tech ones. These things are just so old-fashioned. They were using these hundreds of years ago, these zafus. So what I mean is you get sort of a nice big cushiony thing somewhere with all the controls on it. If you need to have your butt raised up, you press one button and it goes up, 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 up. That's enough. You need this one lifted up and it lifts up. If you're too hot, you can put a cooler in so it cools everything down. Have you ever sat on those? I've sat in some of those chairs in luxury cars where actually the seat is warmed. They do it on a vehicle. Why can't you do that on a meditation cushion if you're meditating in a cold place? You can warm it up. Oh, that's just nice. And if you have sloth and torpor, you can actually do another button and you get a latte or a flat white coming out. There's a much more effective way to overcome sloth and torpor. If you have restlessness, you can never sit still, like a straitjacket type thing which comes around you and holds you still. Or whatever. Something to make it a little bit more interesting, for your latest high-tech meditation cushions. But anyhow, this is what we've got, and it's not that bad. We do have the chairs, and I know some people are too proud to sit on chairs. And I say that quite clearly, that it's okay to sit on a chair. I remember just going on those pilgrimages to India. In Nalanda, there was one place that had carvings on the stupas there, and I would always try and take people to this one carving, which you got to know, and there was a Buddha sitting on a chair. I said, look, if it's all right for the Buddha, it's all right for you, okay? You're not better than the Buddha, are you, Prem? So you can sit on a chair if you want to. In other words, you try and look after your body to be able to relax it so it doesn't just disturb you. And then your mindfulness can start to grow. But once the body is comfortable enough for the meditation, to let go of worrying about it, then, even like good food as well. I always remember when the Buddha became fully enlightened, he had a lovely meal that morning, a really good breakfast from Sujata. So that's one of the reasons why I encourage you. Please, don't eat too much, but eat enough so your body feels at ease in the morning. And he didn't sit down. Have you ever sat down on the root of a tree? It really hurts your bum after a while, because the roots are not flat. Even the Buddha got some grass, which had been cut by somebody to make a little zafu for himself, and sat under the canopy of a beautiful Bodhi tree. And it was in a park in Bodh Gaya, and not far from the river. It was an idyllic place to meditate. I mention that because that helps allow the mind to be peaceful enough to get some nice meditation. That becomes, the first prerequisite to get good meditation. Quiet and comfortable place. And then, to establish that mindfulness in front of you, you cannot really call yourself mindful when you're just dwelling in the past or the future, some fantasies. So it's always been the case in Buddhism that one of the first things to do is learn how to let go of the past and not be concerned with the future, no matter what that future is. There was one of the stories, I remember this was from Nasruddin, a Nasruddin story, from the Sufi tradition of Islam. And anyway, this Nasruddin, he was always saying wrong things, putting his foot in his mouth. And so eventually they were very jealous of him because he was very popular. And so they accused him of heresy. And so he had to be tried before the Shah. And of course, what he actually said, he admitted, it was true. So he was tried by the Shah and said, well, you're guilty. And because it's heresy, that there's only one punishment possible for you. You have to be executed. And how Nasruddin got out of this was really wonderful. He said, well, look, that's such a shame that, you are going to execute me, because I just learned how to teach donkeys how to fly. And the Shah said, well, you can teach donkeys how to fly? Yeah, of course. But it'll take me about a year, said Nasruddin. And so the Shah said, okay, I can't stop your sentence, but I can at least delay it for 1 year. So you can prove that you know how to make donkeys fly. And then after a year, then I have to execute you. Okay, said Nasruddin. And then his friends asked him afterwards, can you really teach donkeys how to fly? Of course not, don't be stupid, no one can. Why do you say that for? I've got an extra year. And who knows, in that year I might die of a heart attack anyway, or the Shah might die. Either way, I've got a bit more hope that something good might happen. And I kind of like that way. He was actually making use of the uncertainty of the future to get out of a death sentence. But anyhow, that in order to be free of the past and the future, because there's so many things you can worry about the future. So one of the reasons, if we ever look at the news, I don't know why, but whenever I look at the news, it's always the bad stuff which might happen. Nuclear war, disaster, things going wrong in this world, corruption, what else have we got in this world? Economic disaster, floods, anything else? I'm sure you can think of some more things to add. But why is it that when people think of the future, they always focus on the bad things which will happen in the future? We don't know. Even when I first came here to Australia, that was about 38 years ago, the monk in charge here at the time, I was helping out Ajahn Brahm. And he was certain that with Ronald Reagan in the White House and Margaret Thatcher in number 10 Downing Street, there was bound to be a nuclear war. So every morning, I couldn't have a cup of tea or have toast or anything, but every morning we had miso soup. Why? Not because it's good for your health, because it's supposed to be good for preventing sickness during radiation events. We had that for about 6 months or 9 months every morning. Got fed up with it after a while. And of course, was there a nuclear war? No, if there was, I missed it. I must have been meditating at the time, I'm not sure. But anyway, it just kind of concerns me, just how many times people think of the future and always think about what might go wrong in the future. It's one of the reasons why that anxiety is a great hindrance to meditation. There's no end of things you can be anxious about. That's why some people have this hypochondria. Every time there's a pimple on me, that must be, what's the latest? A monkeypox. I've got to be very careful on monkeypox because I'm a monk. Anyway, they don't have nunpox. Really unfair. But anyway, there was this hypochondriac, went to see his GP, and every time there was a new disease, this guy was sure he had it. And every time the GP would do the test, you haven't got it, you're free of all of this. In fact, one day the GP said, look, I've really got to teach this guy a lesson. And shouted at him and said, look, there's nothing wrong with you. You're a perfectly healthy man. So you don't need to come and see me. And he treated him so severely that the patient was shocked and stunned. And so he walked out of the surgery, but he was so shocked that he walked right across the road, got hit by a truck and killed. And of course the GP heard the sound of the accident, ran outside, and when he saw that the GP's, he was a bit too severe on this hypochondriac, and had killed him. And that was such a shock to the doctor died of a heart attack. So because the two of them died, almost simultaneously, they were buried in a cemetery in plots next to each other. And the first night, the doctor heard someone knocking on his coffin door. When he opened up, it's only a joke. It was this hypochondriac patient. And the hypochondriac said, Doctor, have you got anything for worms? Sorry. But how can you be free of worry about the future and about carrying the past so you can be free enough to be mindful? One of the nice ways of doing that is to add kindness to your perceptions of the past and the perceptions of the future. When you're kind, you can always look at somebody and see the wonderful parts. You realize just that prison officer who was so mean, he still had a nice side. You can wear him down and get to his nice side where you can say thank you to a prisoner who's really trying to look after him. You can always find some goodness in anybody. One of the most violent prisoners and dangerous prisoners I ever saw was like Ronnie Cray, the Cray brothers in East London. They were really violent. He was the mad one. And sometimes that when you see such people, you're a bit afraid, but he was so kind. And he told me that if I ever get a few quid, I'll send some to your monastery. He never did. He never had a few quid. He died in prison. But nevertheless, that little bit of kindness was something which was quite moving for me. So, that when you see the good and beauty in things, you see the positive part of your own past, it's easy to see the positive side of the future, which means when you're kind to it, it's not so heavy on you. It's not so unbearable. So that's why even what those women did who were traumatized, which I talked about yesterday, that when they developed a sense of kindness to what happened, and they could hug that little girl who was so badly beaten, then that could relieve the heaviness, the weight of the past, and relieve in the same way the heaviness and the weight of the future. The kindness was one of the tricks, not trying to reject it, to think these things didn't happen or can't happen, but you accept it with kindness. And it's amazing just how that changes your perception of things. I don't know how many years ago it was, but the only danger we really have here in this part of Australia, in Bodhinyana Monastery in particular, is bushfires. And many years ago, it was the hottest day ever recorded in the history of Western Australia. It was surpassed later on, but it still ranks as the second hottest day, 46 point something degrees in the afternoon. That's pretty hot. And worse than that, that about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, one of the Anagarikas was running to my hut and said, "There's a bushfire." You can see a big pall of smoke coming up from the south of this monastery. We called the bushfire brigade. We got everybody ready, hoping that the bushfire wouldn't hit. But it came into the monastery about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. A crown fire. Have you ever seen those type of fires? The trees explode. It's like a bomb going off. It is awesome in the true sense of the word to see. And the fire officer told us all to evacuate. You know what happened is one of the guests, I don't know why people do this, he decided to change his trousers before he evacuated. So he came running out with his trousers down. Hey, wait for me, wait for me. Why people do this, I just can't imagine. But anyway, we all escaped okay. But when you looked up to our monastery, we saw what was going on there. Things were really exploding. It's like a war zone. Boom, bang. Because what happens, the eucalypt trees, because of the hot temperatures, the oil evaporates, mixed with oxygen, becomes an explosive mix. When I saw that, straight away, you thought, okay, the monastery's gone. All those buildings. And I did most of the building work more than anybody else. I thought, that's it, finished, gone. Because I can't see how anything could exist amidst all those explosions. But of course, in the morning, the head fire officer, took me up to inspect. Everything was still here. And that was an amazing thing because you just need to get to the Kingsbury Drive, the main road. There was no leaves on any of the trees, no greenery left at all. So you could actually see right through the whole of the monastery to the furthest of huts. There's nothing to sort of shade them. All the huts were still there. All the steel roofs, you could see them reflecting the early morning sunlight. Amazing. But I remember at the time thinking and telling the monks when we evacuated, well, okay, it was worth doing. I'm not going to feel bad that it was all destroyed in just a couple of hours of really heavy fire. We can always start again, do it again. And I honestly thought that. I wasn't so disappointed at all. Well, disappointed, yeah, but never going to allow that to stop you doing whatever you can do as a Buddhist monk to serve the community. And so that was teaching me how to deal with anxiety. I really thought everything was gone. But then when you come back, nothing was gone. Sometimes if you have a good attitude and you're a good person, you're doing good things. So often in this world, I don't know how it works, but you come out much better. You don't lose. Anxiety, sometimes I've noticed what you really are afraid of, concerned about, that's actually what comes true. It's almost like you wish it to be. And it comes there to teach you something. But anyway, the anxiety and about the future. Instead of anxiety, I always think, have hope instead. That's one of the reasons why there was a big billboard in the United States many years ago. Don't worry, be happy. And I said, that's not really a good billboard. It'd be much better to put there, don't worry, be hopey. In other words, worry is looking in the future, seeing all the bad things which might happen. Hopiness is looking at the future and thinking all the wonderful things which might happen. Looking at the same uncertain future, but looking at it in a way which is not going to cause you extra stress. And because you are hoping, seeing the good in the future, it's more likely that that goodness will happen. Even in, crikey, come on, even little things like people's relationships. I don't know why people ask me, I'm a monk. Well, I know that people ask me for marriage counselling. I've never been married. I thought I'd escape all of that. But it still comes back to me by saying, Ajahn Brahm, can you please give me some advice on this? And look, it's if you're really concerned, overly concerned about a relationship, then you don't trust the other partner. And that this lack of trust often destroys the relationship. So sometimes you can see what you fear, you're always following your partner or checking up on him or her. Of course, that's going to destroy the relationship. So that's worrying about the future is a huge problem. And about the past. So always, whatever happened in the past, you learn from it. One of the reasons why, if you do any mistakes of the past, please tell someone. An example of this, because I think Venerable Chanda reminded me of this just a few moments ago, what I call the 70% rule. 70% rule means that when you make a mistake, 70% rule, sorry, started off when I was a school teacher, I had to set my first exam in mathematics. Is there any maths teachers here? Anyone good at math? You reckon? Okay, if you heard me say this before, be quiet. See how good you are at maths. 26 sheep in a field. 10 die. How many survive?
16.
No, it's wrong. Wrong answer. 26 sheep in a field. 10 die. How many survive? The answer is 10. I'll say it slowly. 20 sick sheep. Be mindful, listen. That's why they died, they were sick. Anyway, when I had to do set the maths test, because I was a teacher at the end of the year in a high school in the UK, I never set a test before. I said, how do you do this? And so they said, don't set it too hard. If it's too hard and people just get about 2 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 average, they will come away thinking they can't do maths. Set it too easy, they'll get some 100%, 95%. Again, they'll think they can't do maths. So set it so the average score is 70%. Because 70% is a nice score. But also, the most important part of that is not the 70% they've got right, but the 30% they get wrong. Because that's the feedback to me, their teacher. So that the next term I can focus on those parts which I thought they'd learnt, which they hadn't learnt. The mistakes were feedback to me, so I can teach them what they hadn't understood yet. And that became the 70% rule, like in life, like in meditation, like in anything. If you always score 100%, you learn nothing. But if you make mistakes, where you make mistakes, admit them, let somebody know, and then you grow from them, you learn from them. That's why mistakes are not something which are to be hidden. The mistakes are to be let other people know about them. And sometimes those mistakes can be really, really funny. That's why I'm trying to think of some of my latest mistakes. I just remember the old ones very easily. Like for once when I went over to Penang, when they sent me off at the airport, they gave this really delicious, it's like coffee, milk, lots of sugar. And it was delicious, but then they had a straw in it, and I was trying to suck the liquid through the straw. The straw was blocked. And I was really trying hard to suck the liquid in, and then nothing would come through. And so all my friends, those are people who know the Penangis, Xiaopo and Agnes. Anyway, they had their hands over their mouth, and I soon realised they were trying their hardest not to giggle and laugh. I was doing something stupid, and I couldn't figure out what. I kept on trying to suck. And then I took the spoon out, took the straw out. It wasn't a straw. It was a spoon, really thin plastic. They never had those when I used to drink coffee before, or spoons like metal, with quite fat. And so anyway, I learned from that, and this is a nice thing. I will never do that again. I know the difference now between a modern spoon, which can be all sorts of strange shapes, and a straw. But anyway, if you make a mistake, please admit it. And then you learn from it. So anyway, when you have fun, when you look upon the past with some happiness, with some care, with some love, with some loving kindness, it's not such a burden anymore. And you all know the story. I'll tell it more in depth later on, I'm sure. The anger-eating monster. When you give kindness to the anger-eating monster gets smaller and smaller and smaller, less and less heavy. Which means that what you think was unendurable even becomes a good friend. Many of those prisoners I used to teach in jail, some of them at the time, they were told, even the prison officers told me they were notorious. They'd been in there some very violent crimes, and they're going to be in there for long enough that basically whatever they did, it wouldn't add to their sentence. So they could do whatever they wanted to you. And I remember just going in there and giving this little biro pen by the prison officers in one of the top security jails here. And they told me that this is not a real biro pen. It can write, but it's a security device. If you get attacked, and, men, women, anybody could get raped in those jails. And those prisoners were very big. They worked out in the gym. I didn't work out in the gym. I work out in my cave or in my bathroom. I do 10 push-ups every morning. I do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But anyway, and they said, don't let the prisoners know it's a security device, it's top secret. But in the ceilings were what looked like smoke alarms. They're not smoke alarms, they're security devices. If you get attacked, point the pen at that device, it will go off, we know exactly where you are, it will come and save you. Because there have been many visitors like me have been attacked inside the jails. And of course, as soon as I went into my class, they said, oh, you got one of those security devices too, have you? They all know what was going on. And then this big guy, he became a great friend afterwards. And he told me, he said, do you really think, Brahm, that you can even push the top of that button before we raped you? And I said, no. You get me first. He said, yes, we would. But you don't have to worry about those security devices. You've got enough friends inside this jail that we will protect you. And I realized he was being sincere. And that because you've been kind to them, they'd always protect you. You didn't need a security device. It meant that when you're kind to people, you're kind to animals, you're kind to snakes, you're kind to even other dangerous animals like human beings. They'll always look after you. You don't have anything to fear. That's what I mean by when you're kind to the past, it can't harm you. When you're kind to the future, it doesn't harm you. It makes it easy to let the past and the future go. When it's a danger, a real danger, Of course it's hard to let it go. So you can't be mindful in this present moment. So that becomes one of the great things to be able to do. Let go of the past and the future. Be here in this moment. But how can you stay in this moment? That's called letting go so far. How can you let this present moment actually be here? When you're enjoying it, when you're kind to it, when you smile at it and it smiles back. There you go, you smile back. Whenever I smile at anybody, usually they smile back. Thank you. Because that's just the way that we react to life. And so learning how to smile at the present moment. Here it is. See the beauty in it. See the goodness in it. See the delight in it. If it's something which is hard to bear, nevertheless, you always know you're going to learn something great from this. The most difficult teachers I ever had when I was a student were the ones I was scared of them, but I learned the most from them. And this is one of the reasons why you can always see something good in everything you have to deal with. And then you can stay in the present moment when it's enjoyable. It's one of the reasons I said why we have restlessness. It's because that we're trying to control something. Even just when you do start watching your breath in the meditation. First time I went to Malaysia, I couldn't believe it that people were complaining about a problem I'd never heard of before, which was called samadhi headache. And I couldn't understand that, because I would do meditation to overcome headaches, not to get them. But what was happening? People were trying to control their attention on the tip of their nose. And when you do that, take the glasses off. Many have seen this before. I'm now going to watch the tip of my nose with my eyes open. And what happens is your eyes also focus on the tip of your nose, and you go cross-eyed. And if you don't notice this when you're watching at the tip of the nose, but many people watch the tip of their nose, and underneath their eyelids, their eyes go cross-eyed. Anyone will get a headache along here after a while. Forcing it, not allowing things to be natural, to be at ease, means that you get tightness and headaches even in your meditation. You can't sustain that. So instead, that if you're in this present moment, it's something beautiful, something which is delightful. You don't have to force your attention on it. You don't have to concentrate. I haven't mentioned this yet, but that's one of those worst translations of Buddhist terms made into English, concentrate. It does not mean that. If you want to check me out on that, you can just ask any Chinese people who read the books on meditation in Chinese. This never means concentrate at all. It means stillness. So when you know that this meditation is about stillness, not concentration, stillness does relax you. And the way to be still is in this present moment. Just relax in this moment. And part of stillness is silence. You don't need to give things names or words. I know this is a bit sort of cheeky to the Vipassana tradition, but you know that sometimes that I tell the story of this woman who went to the temple one evening. She was a very wealthy woman, lived in a really nice big house on her own. And so she had a guard on the house, like a person who looked after the entranceway. She told him, "Look, I'm going to the temple this evening. There's lots and lots of burglars in this area. I've been warned that there's many houses have been robbed. So please be careful while I'm out." And he said, "Easy, ma'am. I do mindfulness training. So I will be able to watch your house, no trouble at all. I'll be very alert. Great. So off she went, and when she came home, she found her house had been robbed and ransacked. And she asked the guard, I thought you were going to look after my house for me. He said, yeah, I did. Well, how come it's been ransacked? What happened? Well, I saw the burglar going in. And I noted, burglar going in, burglar going in, burglar going in. I saw all your jewellery going out, jewellery going out, jewellery going out. I saw them driving the truck in, truck going in, truck going in. I saw safe being pulled out of the wall, safe being pulled out, safe being pulled out. I was mindful all the time, madam. Was that enough? No, of course not. So there's much more to the mindfulness than just noting. In fact, just noting misses a lot of what's really going on, which is lovely if you can, when you're meditating, be silent. You see much more. And what you see is more delightful. It's more enjoyable. It's one of the reasons why the more you speak inside, the less you see. And just the duller your experience becomes. If you can see things in silence, just you go outside and just look at the forest. It's absolutely, I don't tire of this forest around here. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous. The dawn this morning as I came down here just at 5 o'clock was spectacular. And I lived here for years. You never tire of it. But if I started like photographing it, or trying to take notes about it, to describe it or write a poem about it or something, I would miss it. The best beauty is experienced in silence. So that's one of the reasons why that when we have enough mindfulness, you'll notice that you're in this moment, not forcing yourself here, but happily being here. And you become silent. You don't need to describe this moment to yourself. In fact, you notice that all descriptions miss out too much. In the silence, you can see the whole picture. And it's also, in silence, it's much more delightful. It's one of the reasons why that you haven't been to my cave yet, but apparently on Saturday, next Saturday, is that right, Nordia? Yeah, next Saturday, you're going to have a tour to the cave, apparently. And the reason I like it, it's totally silent in there. Anything noise outside, I just cannot hear. If the monks are banging on the door on the outside, hey, there's a fire, there's a snake, or the monks have run off with the nuns, or I don't know. I wouldn't hear it. And it's silent, and it's delightful in there. There's nothing to do in there except just to be in the moment. So little by little, I just start to enjoy the mindfulness is silence in this moment, natural, nothing to do. And it becomes a very wonderful place to hang out. Okay, it's 9 o'clock now, so we do have some interviews now. So when we have the interviews, please keep it to 10 minutes each, and please try to keep it to your meditation if you at all possibly can. And please, no marriage counselling. I've never been married. Not about any job advice, because the one just had the one job for the last 48 years. So anyhow, I hope you have a wonderful morning, and I'll see this for those of you on the interviews, or this afternoon on the interviews. Okay? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Very good. I was going to talk about Anapanasati, but I never got past it again.